Welcome to the BMC Service Resolution video series. My name is Darius Wallace. I'm a solution architect and I'm a part of the R&D organization. In this segment, we are going to focus on some of the key concepts behind service resolution. We gave an overview in a previous segment, but this segment is going to go a little bit further into some of the details behind some of the principles and the concepts that make up service resolution. Before we get into that, we got to put up this legal notice to make sure everybody's on the same page about what can and cannot be done with this material. Now that that's out the way, let's go ahead and jump into it. So as I said, we're going to start off with some key concepts, the philosophy, the big picture, so you have some context that goes along with the technology that enables service solution. This is going to be extremely important because there's some previous terminology and references that have evolved over time. And we've taken a different look at the solution since when we started this back around 2007. So we want to make sure that those concepts and that philosophy is front and center. So as you're having conversations with the customer, you can actually bring them forward into the paradigm that we're using for implementing this solution and make sure it aligns with their business needs. So to start, what we're going to do is look at the big picture and the different components that are in place. The key thing to be aware of here is that we looked at the holistic solution and we've evolved the capability with that holistic solution in mind. So what I want to start with here is that end-to-end story, all of the components that in one way or another contribute to enabling or improving the capability of the customer to achieve some of their goals. So this is going to be the big picture. Then what we're going to do is go in and break down each of those components, understand the terms. But now that you have the big picture, or when you have the big picture, you'll have the context in which to frame this terminology that we'll spend the rest of the time on. So when you look at the picture from top to bottom and you look at the broader scope of the opportunity, you essentially have four disciplines in play. You have service management, event management, configuration management, which is supported and enabled by automated discovery. All four of these pillars contribute to enabling the goals that you have in a service organization to establishing stability within the environment. We'll start with the right-hand side and look at the elements that make up service management. There's a lot of focus here. There's a lot of attention in certain organizations around ensuring they have the right components in order to react and respond to incidents as they come up, to manage their environment from a change process, and then also have the additional ability to support understanding what's going on and identifying trends with problem management. In addition to that, and oftentimes in parallel, there's a focus on making sure you have a line of sight to the items or the devices that are out in your infrastructure and being able to tell when there's a problem with those devices, so that when you reach a certain threshold that indicates that device is not performing as you expected, you can respond to it and react and then get it back to where it should be. Even with that basic insight, with that basic awareness, oftentimes customers try and immediately create tickets so that you can tie that proactive awareness into the ongoing process for getting the system back up and running. Another pillar is configuration management. This is the representation of what is in your environment. This is where you capture and model those pieces of information that reflect the devices as well as the relationship between those devices in your environment. And that is facilitated by information that comes from discovery. With discovery, you're able to identify those items, feed them to the CMDB, have your model or your representation of those CIs in place that can then feed into your event management system, which ultimately contributes to supporting the processes on the IT service management side. As you continue to invest and expand on your capability on discovery, you're getting more insight into not only what's in the environment, but you're in the position to also understand what of those items are related to other items. And even more importantly, if something goes down, how does that impact the upstream services or applications that are important to the business? So as you flush out discovery, it gives you more insight to things that you may not have even been aware of are out there in your environment. With that awareness as a tangent benefit, it allows for event management to potentially associate additional monitoring agents for the things that are relevant and important to support the IT service management process. So again, this is the big picture. It's intended to show you the potential for the end-to-end flow. And you don't walk in and try and swallow this whole thing in one shot. There is a lot of different opportunities here. Different customers start with certain pillars or certain processes. Sometimes they run in parallel and disconnected, and they're very effective in their pillars. But where the strength comes is when you're able to tie these different disciplines together in order to prove that end-to-end benefit to ensuring the customer is able to have a good handle on their environment, maintain stability, and being in the best position to respond to issues as they come up. So now let's break this down a little bit and understand the different levels of capability, the different levels of maturity that would fit into that broader model that we have in play. We'll start off with the first basic capability of being able to identify events when they occur and how do you deal with those events within that higher level process we talked about. Then we'll delve a little bit further into level 2 when you not only have the events, but you have information about the CIs. With those two pieces of information, how does that add value to some of the upstream processes that you're trying to support? And finally, in a higher level of maturity, you're able to take a look at models that are in place to understand what's connected to what. It establishes the context for when a problem occurs, what you do and how it's connected to things that it impacts that are important to the business. So let's take a look at each one of these things. Let's start with level 1, when you have the basics of an event. At that level, you're just trying to capture information that something has gone wrong. And when something has gone wrong, you're trying to take that information and make sure that it's available to be acted upon by the service management processes. But even at this basic level, it's very limited information. Still valuable, still puts you in a mode of being proactive. So it's a very good first step if that step hasn't already been taken. But you get pieces of information, and at least you have an awareness that something's gone wrong. And then of those things that have gone wrong, you would try and figure out which are the most relevant that you would then act upon and communicate over to the incident management system so that people can get in place to resolve or investigate further and get more details to ultimately resolve that issue. In this case, that results in what we refer to as an event incident. It's an incident. All we're saying is that it contains information that's pretty basic about the event. We don't have other pieces of information at our disposal as a part of the automated process. Now, the investigation may yield information about the CI and how it should be categorized and who it should be routed to, but that's where the manual processes kick in that go above and beyond just having, hey, something's wrong, here's some information about the error or the alert, let's make sure somebody gets on top of this and then acts on it. Even at this level, you can do some basic categorization, which we refer to operational categories. And in another session, we'll talk about how you leverage operational categories in order to facilitate routing of these event incidents to the right people. If we tie it back to the processes that we talked about before, it involves essentially IT service management and event management. And this diagram is simply to illustrate how that connection occurs. You have an error or an event that occurs in your infrastructure. It results in an event, which then translates into an event incident. Now let's talk about level 2. Level 2 pulls into play two pieces of information about your infrastructure. It includes the event, but also has a reference and a tie to a CI. Those two pieces of information take you up a level in your ability to act upon the issue from the automated generation of that incident. With those two pieces of information, you're able to then leverage the CI to look up additional information in the CMDB, further enrich the ticket that then can be used to route to the right people. This is a very good step in moving forward and not only being proactive, but also providing richer content in the ticket so that the folks in the service organization can then act upon that information. At this level, what we end up producing is what we refer to as an infrastructure incident. So the type of incident is referred to as an infrastructure incident, which is pulling together the two pieces of information I just described, the event plus the CI. When those two things come together, the system is able to leverage that and look up additional information to enrich the ticket, providing more content and a better ability to make sure that it gets to the right people at the right time with the sufficient information for them to act upon it. And with that, you get faster resolutions in solving problems. At this level, you now see that you have the three primary processes or three primary pillars. In this illustration, we've kind of combined the discovery process with the CMDB and the configuration management because discovery is a fundamental capability that populates the CMDB. The CMDB establishes that reference point that allows you to have the content and context that you can then communicate over into your event management system so that when events come in, those events can then be associated with those references, in this case with those CIs. And from there, you're able to generate an incident that your service management team can act upon. And as you see in the lower right-hand corner, it makes reference to the infrastructure incident that is then leveraged. Again, one of the subtle points here to be made is you have two pieces of information getting pulled into representing a single incident inside the incident management system. That's one of the key concepts to understand about service management. It's all about the incident. Once you have an incident recorded, any additional information that is related to that incident or specifically to that CI, while that incident is open, you want to continue to enrich that incident because that allows you to continue working that one item. Now, from that incident, you may determine that there's some secondary operations or other groups that need to get involved, in which case you can spawn off other related incidents to work in concert to ultimately solve the issue. But from an automated standpoint, you want to pull the information into, whenever possible, a single incident so that you can then act upon that incident, as opposed to finding yourself in the situation where you're creating multiple incidents against the same event, and then the service desk organization is now chasing potentially independent, what they think to be independent threads, when in fact it could be all related. So as we move forward and we look at level 3, we're taking information that was previously referred to as the event and the CI, and we're putting it now into a model. This is what establishes context. So when something goes wrong over here, you know upstream that something over there has failed. And the thing that's failed is something that's important to your business or to your customer. That context is invaluable when you're looking at trying to do things in the service management organization and address certain things like prioritization. Which things should I work on first? Knowing what impacts things that matter to the business allows you to establish that prioritization and work on things with that priority in mind, as opposed to dealing with things first in, first out. Last thing you want to be doing is trying to fix a computer that's under somebody's desk that manages your lunch application, when in fact the main web page that serves your customers is down. So the important thing to note about context is it's made up of essentially two parts. It's made up of identifying the thing that had the error and then understanding what it impacted upstream. The thing that had the error we refer to as the causal CI, which gets reflected as a causal incident. The thing that got affected upstream is referred to as the impacted CI, or gets represented as an impacted incident. So these two things together allow you to have that context. It's not necessary that you have an impact incident all the time, and we'll talk about the trade-offs of those in a minute. But the key thing I want you to make sure you understand is that there are two aspects of establishing context: the root cause, where the event occurred, and the upstream CI that was impacted by that. Now, there's oftentimes several things or many things in between. But the point is, you want to know the root cause, you want to know what it impacts to make your priority. If there are things in between that you care about, you would have then put some identifications on those so that when those goes down, those would trigger other items to come into play to generate incidents if you needed to. In this model, we're just focused on the fact that something went wrong. What does it impact? Make sure I reflect that information as a part of my incident structure on the service management side. This illustration highlights that structure. On the left side, you see that you had an event occur. You can capture the event itself and understand what CI that event occurred on. And as you see above, there are 3 services that were impacted by this one CI, degrading in service or maybe even going down. On the right-hand side, you're now looking at an incident model that allows you to capture an incident for the causal CI. That lets you know this is the problem, this is where the problem occurred, this is what needs to be worked, this is what needs to be fixed. The other incidents, which are referred to as impact incidents, represent the different services or application or higher level CIs that were impacted by the causal CI. These incidents serve a different purpose. They're primarily there for awareness and feed into other processes that may have to do with reporting at a level that is more relevant. For example, you would want to understand from your business that the banking service has gone down, and you're not as interested in the fact that server 122-77 went down as a business owner. You want to understand information about the banking service not necessarily giving me a report telling me about what's going on with server 122-7. By having this incident in place, this impact incident in place, I can then run reports against that. I can target my service level management metrics against that. And I can also trigger notifications and bring awareness that reference the service that's impacted as opposed to referencing the CI that had the root cause. Now, this does add another layer of incidents, and for more mature organizations who can manage and understand how to filter out the differences between the incidents that are being worked and resolved versus the incidents that are there to facilitate business processes, communication, as well as supporting additional reporting or analytics that you're running, those organizations have no problems with having this other layer of incidents because it's serving a dual purpose by having the causal as well as having these other incidents in place. Other organizations don't necessarily want to pay attention to the overhead of the extra incidents. And their model looks more like this. You just have the causal incident. Now, inside of the causal incident, there is a relationship that shows what are the impacted CIs, but that's a part of the causal incident. It's not broken out as a separate incident that can then be leveraged for several other business processes. It's just related information that's contained within the causal incident. The other final point that we want to make here is from the picture that we showed before, we talked about the fact that you can go to a level 3 where you're dealing with models. It's very important to understand. Most people, when they think of a model, this is the picture they see. They see in their mind a hierarchical model. And hierarchical models are not trivial to put together, let alone maintain. They are worth the investment for those few sets of services or applications that require a very diligent focus. And you maintain, you put processes around it, you put resources around it to maintain that hierarchy because you want to stay laser focused on anything that may happen within that hierarchy that may affect that higher level service or application. However, for most other things that are out there in the environment, a simple or static model is just as effective. It serves the purpose of letting you know that this is something that's out here. Here are the things that are connected to it, so that if any one of those things go down, I know it impacts this other item. And therefore, it's a very flat model. The advice is start with the simple and static model if you're coming new into models. That gives you huge benefit in supporting and establishing context. You can then evolve that static model for the subset of things that you would apply this level of investment into to make it into a more hierarchical model. Of all the things you will have a subset of hierarchical models, and most of your other things will be the simple static models, because you want to invest in the things that are the most relevant and important, but you still want to be able to manage and maintain awareness about those other items at a different level of investment. That brings us to the end of this segment, and hopefully this information proved to be helpful and gave you insight into some of the key concepts and the philosophy that we have around service resolution and supporting that big picture of going all the way from discovery through configuration management to event management and ultimately enabling the service management processes. Thank you again and look forward to seeing you in the next segment.